Okay, so I did think the last video was going to be the last of this section, but I thought I'd make one more example of this to kind of help you with this process of finding a sum of a bunch of numbers. Um, Again, we have a sum of numbers, and throwing that in the calculator just by itself would be a little tedious to do. And so it's a lot better when we use our partial sum formula for arithmetic sequences. And if you look here, the terms that you're adding up, well, what's happening between them? Between 1 and 4, you're adding 3. Then you're adding 3 from 4 to 7. And then from 7 to 10, again, we're adding 3. And so on, right? So every time we're adding 3 in this sequence, and so it's an arithmetic sequence of numbers that we're adding up. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to write a formula for this sequence. I know here this is my n equals 1 term, this is my n equals 2 term, this is n equals 3, n equals 4, and so on. I need to figure out what n is here, right? Because I'm going to need to use n in the formula that I have for the partial sum, right? If you remember our formula for the partial sum, I'll just write over here, S sub n is for an arithmetic sequence. Oh, can you see that? Yeah, there's kind of a glare right there, isn't there? Well, I think you can still see it okay, is n times the first term plus the nth term divided by 2. Okay? And so we need to figure out what n is, right, in order to be able to use this formula. In order to figure out what n is, we need to kind of know a formula for this sequence, right? What's the sequence that when you plug in 1, you get 1, when you plug in 2, you get 4, when you plug in 3, you get 7, and so on, okay? Well, it's an arithmetic sequence, so it's going to be of the form d times n minus 1 and then plus a, right? Where a is your first term and d is the common difference between the terms. So in this case, d is 3, right? Because we're going up 3 each time. And a is the first term, so it's 1 in this case. Okay? So this is my formula for a sub n. So then let's find n by, well, we want to know what n is, which n will give us 31 for a sub n. So we're going to say 31 equals 3 times n minus 1 plus 1. So then we divide or subtract 1 from both sides. We get 30 equals 3 times n minus 1. And there you could either distribute or divide. I think I'll just divide both sides by 3. So you get 10 is n minus 1, and then I'll add 1 to both sides. So we get n is 11. Okay? So this term, our very last one, happens at n equals 11. Okay? So what we want to do to find this sum is we're trying to compute the sequence of partial sums where we add up 11 of the terms, right? So we're doing S11. Sorry, my video seems to be kind of zooming in and out all of a sudden. Okay, so we're doing S sub 11, and so we just use this formula. Okay, so S sub n is n times a1 plus an divided by 2. So n is 11, so we plug that in. So 11 times a1 plus, well, an was, n is 11, so a11 divided by 2. Okay, so it's going to be 11 times A1 was 1, right? That was our first thing in the sum. The last thing in the sum was 31. And then divide by 2. So we've got 11 times 32 divided by 2. Or in other words, I think this would be 11 times 16. And so what would that be? We'll have to throw that in the calculator. $176. Okay, so that's going to be the sum on this one. Okay. So this is kind of a little tricky. There's a lot of things going on, but essentially you just want to use this formula to find what the sum is. You notice that the terms are arithmetic. They're getting added the same thing to every time. And so you write an equation for the arithmetic sequence, and then you use that to find what your last term is, which n that was, and then you just plug everything into the formula to figure out what this sum would be. Okay. Notice this wouldn't really work to do. I mean, you could do this by hand, but you're adding up 11 numbers, right? And that would take a little bit to punch in your calculator. So this is a much more efficient way of doing it. You can do it quite easily without having to, you can just plug in these two numbers into your calculator, right? Which isn't nearly as hard. So hopefully that kind of helps. Good luck on the homework. Let me know if you have questions.